Welcome. So this is the second development log for Glenwich. We've got quite a bit to talk about, I think. But yeah, you'll have to bear with me because I've been away for the last 2.5 weeks, and I'm a little bit jet lagged. So hopefully that doesn't show up too much in the video. Um, but yeah, anyway, I think me being away, not really much has changed since the last video per se, but I think the kind of goals have shifted a bit. So I think it's a lot to talk about. Regardless. Um, so yeah, I've got these notes here. I've also got other notes on another character, so maybe I'll switch between the two. But yeah, I was skimming through the first video, and I think yeah, quite a bit has changed actually, like noticeably, because I do have the game open in the other video. Um, and yeah, I guess the main one is the UI is pretty much completely different. So you can see the whole design system, and then even the structure here. So if I shrink this, we're now a little bit more responsive, which is quite nice. And even for mobiles, you see this nav bar at the bottom, which is pretty cool. Ignore the code in the background and the lag. I hope that doesn't show up too much in the video. But yeah, you can see we're looking pretty good. We're looking quite smooth, quite sharp, which is very nice. And the reason for this is because we have a new artist who is a longtime friend of mine. We go way back, and we have very similar kind of interests and passions that lead us to make this game. So it's actually really nice to work with him on it. Um, and yeah, basically, we're going to get a bit more high fidelity. So before we had a more pixely approach, as you can see in these icons and the items, some of them have been moved over to the new designs. You can see here that's a new axe. And we've got a new pickaxe as well. These are all being worked out, of course, but you can see the old style here is this kind of pixely fish, which is still really cool, and I do love it. But it's just more of a feasibility thing. So yeah, having my friend on board hopefully will be a bit more consistent with releasing art and also skins as well, which is another new thing I'll talk about soon. So yeah, I guess from introducing the new art system, I figured it makes sense to revamp the interface itself. And you can see from these icons as well, we've got lovely new pictures for things. So hopefully you'll notice that a lot more going forward as we kind of shift over the items and introduce some more pixels to the mix. Um, so yeah, you can already see a pretty big visual difference, but there's also a lot of stuff that's going to be happening in the next couple of months or until we hit kind of like a version 1.0. And yeah, this I've been talking about 3 minutes now. I'm going to try and keep this reasonably brief because I think the last video was quite long. But there is a lot of ground to cover, and I'll maybe try and go for more frequent videos with shorter durations to keep it more consumable because I think infrequent 40-minute videos might be a bit excessive. So yeah, and again, I can't remember if I mentioned it, but I am a little bit jet lagged, so hopefully I can keep on track. But yeah, so we've got a new interface. It's nice and responsive. We've got new styling and new art, which is pretty exciting. Um, and yeah, I'm hoping we can hit like a version 1.0 reasonably soon. And I think the interesting thing is we reached this point of contention where um, development got pretty slow, and there's a lot of bugs, and there's a lot of things I want to be doing, which I've not really been able to do. And I've kind of the cat is out of the bag in that I'm now deciding to rewrite the entire game engine. So that's kind of the bigger update of everything that I'll mention in this video. Um, but yeah, there's more in the post that is in the Discord, and then there's a kind of a blog thing we have on the website somewhere. Maybe it's linked in the game. I don't think so. But yeah, it's pretty cool. Basically, rewriting the whole game engine, and you might think, ah, that's so software. Um, I don't know. It's very typical for people to do that, but I promise you, I think it makes sense. So since I started making this, it kind of started as an experiment of like, oh, what if I approached building a game um, in a very pragmatic and like just kind of discovering as I go kind of way. Like I'm not really a game designer, and maybe that shows if you play the game. But I hope I've kind of refined something of an idea from here that people seem to enjoy and interact with. And the goal is now I've got this idea of what I want to be doing and the constraints I want to work with. I can now start looking at rebuilding the game engine to actually suit that structure. Whereas before, I didn't really know what I was doing or what mechanics were happening or where things live or what the client looks like or any of these things. And now I have a pretty good idea of what to do. And that means that I can build hopefully a nicer system to let me do that. And I think a lot of what was laid out initially was quite packed together. And so being able to iterate on that proved quite difficult. And there's some things or features that I really wanted to incorporate where it's just quite difficult to do. And a big example of that is player versus player combat, and also party combat, so player versus mobs, where you have multiple players like friends in a kind of group party. And those are all quite difficult, but from starting the engine from scratch, I'm able to design with that as a first principle, which is pretty important. And another big thing is also testability. So if you're ever programmed or whatever, there's a thing like test-driven development where you kind of drive your coding approach through writing tests first. And I've kind of led with this much more as a primary development style for this new engine. So I actually have a nice test suite of not too many tests, but like a good amount that I think cover some of the core functionality. And I've got a nice to-do list of things to be testing as we go. And this is really useful for things like simulating the performance of, how the server can cope with many players as well. Um, so I can now kind of just spin up a world and have, 10,000 characters cutting trees, and I can simulate those environments and make sure that things are working as they should be. Um, which is, something that is in the initial engine, but has just not really been a consideration up front. It's always been quite awkward to work with. So yeah, it's a pretty big deal. It's a lot of work. Maybe halfway through some of the big things, but still, there's going to be a whole path for how do I migrate from the original game instance to the new one. And it's very doable. And I'm hoping I can deliver this in the next couple of months, maybe end of November or early, what's the one after November, December. Brilliant. So yeah, that's pretty cool. There's a whole post on it, and I think a lot of the videos coming up will go over this, and I'll walk over the tests in a second actually. But yeah, those are the big things. So we've got new interface, new artist, nice big game engine that's being rewritten, and then just a couple of little tweaks. So I've mentioned smoother performance. I guess I've been squashing bugs. I don't know, don't remember anything about that really, but I trust my prior self. The chat is back, so you can see here I've reintroduced the chat. Um, there's going to be a lot of work to improve this, so the chat system's still pretty rubbish, to be honest. But it's something I really want to introduce as good social features in the game, and I think I might lean more towards like a forum as opposed to real-time chat, but we'll see. And then nearby players is another one. So maybe if there's people playing in this particular area, I can demo this. But if you begin an action, you can see kind of who's doing what. So I've got me, this person, and this person, all in the same area. Don't know why that links twice. I guess it's just maybe reordering it as it clicks. But you can see who's nearby, and if it's too many characters, it goes into a list view. And I want to have a list view anyway, just to see who these people are, and maybe hover over to show the names as you go. But yeah, you can see like kind of who's doing stuff with you, which is pretty cool. And maybe the last big thing to point out is skins, which is really cool. So you can see what skins you have here, and you can equip them, and other people can see your skins too. Also in this thing, as well as in the chat here, you can see this is a little bit of a weird bug actually. but I won't go into detail on that. But in theory, if you see a message here, like see if this works, you can see my skin, which is pretty cool. Um, so yeah, that's quite fun. Hopefully things look pretty cool, and we'll get better as we go. But yeah, that's pretty much that on what I can remember has changed. Let me switch to another character, which I think has some more notes in there. Yep. Uh, oh, that's everything we mentioned. Cool. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I guess yeah, V1 still in the horizon. I don't know when that will come, but yeah, new game engine to look forward to. Um, so yeah, do stay tuned, and yeah, lots of cool skins to be done as well by our new artist. Fruit Pencil is their kind of Discord name that you can reach out to them if you have any questions or demands. Yeah, and it's also a cool avenue because we can do lots of kind of limited time seasonal skins, which would be good. And of course, we'll have options for them to be cosmetic paid for things, which will also mean that we can support the game costs for servers and all this kind of stuff as well. Yeah, so just to dive into the code a little bit, or just to give a bit of background, you can turn off the video at this point if you don't care about the technical parts, but and I won't dig in too deep on this anyway. Um, but yeah, this is the code for the new engine. At least these are the tests. I don't know how much stuff we've written. I've called it TickForge, um, which is basically the name of the server, but it'd be cool to make that agnostic to the game itself, so that maybe this could be open source, something, and other people can use it. Um, but let's see how much code this is. Actually, I think this might be a bit misleading. Okay, so it's 300,000 lines of code. That's not correct because of this folder here. So maybe if I did, maybe if I run it in source main Java, so, ooh, my too jet lagged for this. Oh no, it's in, hang about, bear with. Oh yeah, okay, cool. So this should work. Yeah, 2,387 lines of code. So this gateway folder is generated stubs from protobuf messages. So this generates a shitload of code. Um, and actually, most of the logic is here. It's about 2,300 lines of code, and growing. And yeah, you can see we've got lots of tests this time, which is pretty cool. So I think maybe what's a good one to show? Um, I guess I can just run them all. So if I run all the tests, there's about, what was it, 57 that tests all sorts of areas of the code, from in-game logic to kind of more technical things like serialization. Can they equip an item? And let's just go over this test. So we set up kind of a bunch of mocked dinghies or bits of state. And then we're saying, let's get a lobster, add it to their inventory. We're going to run the game engine, register the player, and then start them doing what? Equipping some food. And then we assert that they have, uh, okay, that makes sense. We've got 1,000 lobster, we equip 200. So we're checking we have 800 in the inventory and then 200 equipped in the actual kind of equipment gear loadout. So that's an example of a test. This is all very copy paste, lots of refactoring to do, but it works, I think. So that's pretty good. And then there's a bunch of different ones as well as stubs, like, can they queue actions? That's another feature that will be coming with the new engine. Things like expiring the engagements, max stat counts, inventory being too full, equipping items, so many things to test, but it's very good because it means that every change that's released to the game, we can catch bugs, which should mean that we get much more stable performance in game. And already, I think this will make a pretty massive difference based on what's currently running in the production server because uh, things are just built more sensibly from the ground up, which is really nice. So I've already made it so that, in theory, multiplayer parties work for combat, for example. It's like it's quite an easy thing to ship into production now, and things like farming as well is as a that conceptually is more easier to implement now based on how I've implemented the engine, and that's basically uh, in the old game server, it was quite difficult to have kind of, I don't know how to word it, like a kind of a secondary queue of things happening. So you queue an action like cut a tree, and then that takes up your main kind of tick loop of things you're doing. Um, and farming would operate in a different kind of tick loop in that you'd want to be able to cut a tree whilst your, crops are growing, for instance. And that's now modeled more sensibly in this engine, which is quite nice. Whereas to do that in the old engine would take a lot of kind of rewiring things. So yeah, lots of fun stuff. I think it's mostly hooked up with some of the existing components as well. So we have an item service, which anyone can invoke actually, and this engine uses that. So all of the items reference to real in-game items by ID or by names, like the lobster ID, for example, is from the actual item service. And this is a test that invokes a real production server, which is kind of a bad practice, but we'll ignore that for now. Um, so yeah, it's pretty cool, and everything's quite decoupled as well. So a lot of the approach has been vaguely event driven in that if you in queue an action, um, it puts an event somewhere, and then in theory, this engine can be started up, running in production, and listen for those events. So, oh, you've queued this action to cut trees, and it'll actually um, kind of what's the word, process that action and set up your character to start cutting trees, which is pretty cool. So it kind of everything's quite decoupled in that this engine's quite hopefully, dare I say, easy to slot into the existing system. The only difficulty is then making it so that the engine can produce events to then inform state, like, your inventory looks this way, and now the client can fetch that view of the inventory. So lots of things like this to figure out, but it's all very doable. And I've also taken a bit of a radical stance with the approach for the game server, and uh, maybe I'm going into too much detail here, but basically the idea is that to migrate the player state, all we need to do is be able to have all of the mechanics implemented in like a test-driven way. And then in reality, the only thing we care about is what is the inventory state of a player, and then what is their equipment state of a player. Um, and those are things that can be exported from the old server into like a static file as of, time t, loaded into the game engine, and then we'll flip a switch to say, okay, we're using the new system with this state, and then the old system gets turned off. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but to my jet lagged brain, it kind of does. Um, Could always talk about it more in a next video. But yeah, just basically like the idea is that when I run this engine, I can feed it the state of the world and then have it continue from that state. And the state of world is player inventories, player equipment, player stats, and that's pretty much it. The bank is actually a decoupled element from this engine. So the technically we'll have two game servers running, the original one with all of the game engine stuff turned off, but the banking features, leaderboards, etc., turned on. So that will all be routed through there. And then this engine will just focus on actual game loop stuff. And then eventually we'll kind of, cut pieces out to be in more sensible locations. Uh, and the reason why is because the original game server does like so much stuff. It handles like in-game currency transactions, so like purchasing skins or badges. It handles banking, guilds, as in like creating guilds, adding players or whatever, as well as the game engine ticks itself. Whereas the idea here is this will just focus on the actual game mechanics, and then a decoupled system will deal with all of the things like, I don't know, shared guild banks and those kind of things. So yeah, lots of things to figure out, but I don't think it's too difficult to achieve. And yeah, the testing coverage would be really nice to prove that things work, simulate them without having to debug. Like if a bug happens, for example, I can write a test and then just simulate all of the state rather than kind of having to use a real character on production, if that makes sense. And I've got a little Jira board here of the kind of backlog of what's left. I think probably more stuff will be added as we go through, or as I'm implementing the engine. But a lot of this, I think, is a fairly exhaustive list of what's left. So I've been working on, before I left my holiday, I was working on like cooking item recipes. And then in the backlog, we've got things like being able to push updates to players. So that's like, if you fail to cook something, we need to be able to notify a player to say, hey, you failed to cook a lobster or something. And that's actually another system that handles that reads off this event system and pushes the updates to the clients. That's a very decoupled system. So in theory, this is just publishing a message to the right place, which is quite nice. We've got equipment requirements. So I think like if you're mining, you should have, the right pickaxe, for example. Fishing nodes, these are need to be mapped. It's pretty cool because I've already mapped, I think, the tree nodes somewhere. Um, I don't know if I can find it. Maybe it's under the local state or something. I don't know. Uh, what's this? Fishing stuff. I don't know. I don't know. This is all cooking things. It's the first time I've looked at a computer screen for 3 weeks. I'm pretty slow today. Um, oh, here you go. These are the mining nodes, for example. So this is testing that if you mine on a particular deposit, you receive the right ore. So a coal deposit produces coal and so on. Or trees produce tree logs and sap, which is pretty cool. We need to do that with the fishing nodes. We've got read-only pass for inventory. Don't know what that means. I think it makes sense though, but I'll save the explanation. Relic imbuing, treasure chests. So that's kind of the whole gacha stuff of, rolling against a rarity table for some output. Um, Alchemizing items, farming, Glenwich bonds. What else we got? Crushing items, cutting gems. This is a spike is just like discovery work. Excuse me. Um, some one-off executables capture a read state into a snapshot. This is the whole thing I mentioned of the game engine runs on a snapshot. So that snapshot needs to be a defined schema that can be produced from the old game server. So the idea is that if you stop the old game server at say 2 p.m., you take a snapshot, and then at 2 p.m. and 1 second, or I don't know, 2:01 for to make it easier, you load the new game engine and you load it from that snapshot of state. You can have a pretty seamless transition, and this executable just is some way to take the Redis state and put it into a file which we load from within the game engine. And this is quite interesting, actually. This is a bit of an engineering decision I've made that I'd love to deep dive into the next few episodes or something of the devlogs. Docker file for running the game engine. So this is just to put it in production. Like at the moment, it's just a server. It's not actually living or running anywhere. Range combat damage. So I've done all of the melee combat stuff, but I haven't done the ranged or magic stuff. And then player parties, which are technically possible, but there's a little bit of work of orchestrating them, scheduling them, lots of edge cases with like, should you be able to have a party with your other characters under the same account and all this fun stuff. There's probably a ton of other things I've missed, but I think those are the big ticket items. And given we're not at version 1.0, typically, I don't particularly care if I would to turn this on and I've missed something because I can always kind of fix it eventually. And then the idea is at V 1.0, we'd have like a more stable guarantee of if something breaks, it's pretty bad and it will get fixed, or ideally just doesn't break in the first place. But anyway, I've been rambling on for probably 20 odd minutes. I hope this has been interesting. You can see lots of tests failed this time round, which is weird. So that's got to figure that out. But yeah, hopefully in the next episode, I can go into a bit more detail on uh, kind of maybe more specific game engine stuff, or if you have any questions or anything you want me to cover, do let me know. But until then, thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you want, and also join our Patreon if you want to support the development. Um, yeah, have a lovely day. Bye bye.